Hello and welcome to this Money Control interview. We're in conversation with Sir Martin Sorrell, the founder.
Call it Money Control.
That's right.
I thought the world is out of control, not money control.
That's a good way to start this.
Much control to me.
We're in conversation with Sir Martin Sorrell, the founder and chairman of S4 Capital. Thank you very much, Sir Martin. You've cued me to my first question. The world seems out of control.
Yeah, I think, well, if not out of control, certainly turbulent. But I think that's what President Trump likes it to be. He likes turmoil. He's certainly thrown the Greenland cat amongst the pigeons, the EU pigeons, and they're all panicking at the minute. They're all many of them are due to be here, but I think Sir Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, was not, but he addressed the nation this morning on the Greenland issue. He thinks that President Trump is wrong on Greenland. I actually think President Trump has a point about Greenland. The question is, is this the best way to go about it? Maybe it's better to work through NATO or work through rather than against. But he is a real estate guy, so he believes in ownership.
Right. Do you think a solution could emerge out of the meetings that happen here in Davos, considering President Trump is expected, Emmanuel Macron will be here, Sir Keir Starmer will be here? Do you think this could kind of broker some solution here? Because right now it's all happening, on X and Truth Social.
The
spirit of dialogue.
Well, I don't think it's going to be a monologue, not a dialogue. I think the idea that there would be a dialogue, this is going to be a very American-dominated Davos. I mean, you've got Larry Fink as co-chairman with Andre Hoffman. So it's very sort of US-centric. Mm-hmm. The US delegation is huge. They've taken over the church here of the USA House, which I think is the first time they've done that. So it's a huge presence here. And historically, President Trump has sort of been anti-Davos man or woman. Now Davos man and woman are listening to him intently. Do I think they'll break? I don't know, but I would guess no, because these things I think take longer periods of time. But he has, as I say, thrown the Greenland cat amongst the pigeons, and the pigeons are all flurrying around in a state of panic. But that's his style. So he likes to flood the zone. This is the Steve Bannon. I mean, when you think about what's been happening in the last few weeks with Venezuela, with Iran, with Greenland, I mean, it's quite apart from all the other things going on in the world. I think we've got the record number of conflicts in the world at the moment. It is a turbulent time. And how you run a business, a global business, at times like this is quite taxing. I think it actually makes people obviously less certain. There's a tremendous amount of uncertainty about, and then makes them much more cautious. I mean, the amazing thing is the companies, as we were discussing, you overheard our conversation with some of the gnomes here. These were German gnomes. The amazing thing is companies are doing really well. Q3 of last year, S&P 500 was up 12% EPS. Exclude the hyperscalers was 9%. Going into Q4, 6% is the forecast, the Goldman forecast, but they always do better than their forecast, so I would guess it'd be around about 9 or 10% at least. And the forecast, Goldman's forecast for this year, for 26, is 12% EPS growth, which is pretty stunning. So companies are doing well. Supply chain, I think it's about supply chain management. Advertising agents are not doing well, and that's something to do with what's going on in the tech world. That tech companies are spending on capex, so they're spending 550 billion this year on AI, expanding AI capacity. Amazon being the biggest at 135 billion, Google I think 75 or 85 billion, and Meta the same. So they are spending huge amounts of money on capex instead of opex. But having said that, corporate profitability is strong and companies are doing well. GDP in America is forecast to increase this year by 2.6, 2.8%. I think Goldman are up at the top end. I think the average is around 2.5. But the world is probably going to grow a little bit under 3%. China, 5%, came in with 5% for last year. Mm-hmm. This year, similar. India, stellar 6%, Modi on fire. So, having said with all the uncertainty, US-China relationships not in a great state, Russia, Ukraine, Iran and the Middle East, despite all that, inflation not down at 2%, but trending towards that. Interest rates on a downward path, maybe going to go lower, depending on who the Fed chairman is going to be. So we'll see. But it's a difficult world. And I think in that world, companies got to think very carefully where they expand. That's one thing. And they've got to improve their efficiency by adopting AI at greater scale.
Right. Which brings me to my next question. Can India be a pocket of stability in an increasingly turbulent world?
Stability, but can be a pocket of growth. So as you look around the world, India would be right up there, as the fifth largest economy in the world, over 5 billion. So even bigger than Nvidia, or bigger than Alphabet. But Alphabet and Nvidia are catching up their countries in their own right. No, I wouldn't say a beacon of stability, but I would say a beacon of growth. So I think for companies, particularly in an Asian context where you do have the Taiwan risk, I don't think China will invade Taiwan, but I think they'll continue to tighten their grip on Taiwan, and it's inevitable that will happen. I mean, it's fundamental. It's an existential issue from a President Xi point of view. But the alternative, if you have a big position in China, and big defined as more than 15% of your sales in China, do you really want to be bigger given that instability? And the fact that there's different systems, the Chinese system is different and probably will remain different to the Western system, technologically and whatever. So I think, India provides a tremendous alternative. The other thing is Indian entrepreneurs, they've got a big presence here this year. They're superb, and they're growing their position around the world.
Right.
So whether it's Ambani or Mahindra or whoever, it's Mittal. I mean, it's Bharti. I mean, it's extraordinary, and they've done an extraordinary job, not just in an Indian context, but now increasingly abroad.
Right. And what do you make of Prime Minister Modi's leadership, the way he's dealt with Trump? The US-India trade deal is still not a done deal.
I think he's done a super job. I think he understands brands. He'd be a great proponent for our industry. So I think he's done a great job. I think there is some concern about the positions he's taking amongst some people. I disagree. I think he's taken the right position. Playing both ends off against the middle is probably the right strategy. What Mark Carney did over the last week with China, maybe President Trump is pushing people towards China. That certainly seems the case with Canada, and whether we will see a rebalancing as a result of American, the new Monroe, the Don Doctrine. The Donroe Doctrine. Whether that's going to drive people away is another question. I think, I was in Zurich yesterday with a group, actually from Asia, and I think the feeling was that it would create more of this sort of duplicity, if that's the right way of putting it. Saudi, their biggest trade partner is China, the biggest defense partner is the US. So a foot in both camps. And, given the Greenland situation, isn't that going to drive Europe? Europe is the battleground. If you're a Chinese company denied access like BYD to the US, or like Huawei to the US, what do? You go to South America, you go to Africa, you go to the Middle East, you go to APAC or the rest of APAC. But then you try and drive into Europe, because Europe is 18 trillion. So it's the same size as China, less than the US, which is 28 trillion. And so Europe becomes the battleground. So, whilst Europeans, I don't think that they think they have a strong hand, a strong hand of cards with the Americans. Maybe there's a little bit more than they think. Because of the position with China. I think what Mark Carney has done with Xi is really interesting. And I thought President Trump's reaction, I think it was on Friday night when he was getting on his helicopter, he said, basically said, "Well done, Mark." he said, he would, if he can negotiate a deal with China, he should do it.
Right. Stepping away from geopolitics to the world of advertising, we have seen
Well, advertising is infected by geopolitics. It's not isolated. I think people in our industry tend to think it's isolated. I think it's driven by it. So a lot of what we've just been talking about is going to drive where people go and how they go and what they do.
But we're also seeing a lot of consolidation. The Omnicom IPG merger, WPP.
This is out of desperation, not this is because Omnicom was flat and IPG was going down the tubes. No, I think that's like Paramount and WBD getting together. It's not like Netflix and WBD, but it's a contraction of capacity. So it's what I would call a defensive merger. I think the one good thing it does for Omnicom is it cements its position in the US, which is the biggest market in the world, and it's growing strongly. So they will capitalize on that. But it's going to take them 2 years to sort it out. They announced it last year. It took a year to go through regulation. There's a lot of turmoil. They've reduced their headcount from 127,500 to a projected 104,000. So it's a bit of mayhem there. But this is their first budget year, and then they'll need another year to tighten it up. But they'll have a more efficient combination. But it's not about top line growth. It's about cost management and reduction of capacity. And it's really concentrated in the 300 billion. The market in 24, the ad market was about $1 trillion. Last year it was about 1.1. This year it'll be about 1.2 trillion. About 700 billion in 24 was digital. 300 billion was traditional. Traditional was going backwards by 5 to 15, depending on whether you had live sport or not. You didn't have live sport, you're down by 15. You had live sport, you were down by 0 to 5 sort of thing. That's continued into 25 and will continue into 26. And what Omnicom and IPG is about that declining 300 billion. So it's like Paramount getting together with WBD. You got 2 studios, you make 1.
Right.
So you had 2 agencies, you make 1. And I think so. Highly defensive. It doesn't do much on the AI front for Omnicom. It doesn't do much on the data front. They make a noise about it, but I don't think it does. I was out on the West Coast last couple of weeks, and there is a feeling that it doesn't do much other than create a bigger entity. They have more leverage on that 300 billion. When they go to negotiate with a Disney or a Fox or an NBC or a CBS or whatever it is on media rates, they'll get a bit more traction. But in the digital space, I'm not sure it does much for them.
Right. I also wanted to understand from you in terms of the impact of the creator economy or influencers.
Yes.
What does that do to traditional advertising as we know it?
Well, it drives more into the digital space. It makes that 700 billion I was referring to even more important. That's growing at 10, 15, 20%. But the numbers are huge. I mean, Google must be up close now to 300 billion. So if the market's 1.2 trillion, right, Google's a quarter of the whole. Yeah. And digital is probably 900 out of that 1.2, and Google is getting up to 300, so it's the third. And then Meta was 150, it's probably 175, 200 billion. And Amazon was 60, it's probably about 65, 70 billion now. So those 3 platforms, Alibaba, Tencent, and TikTok. TikTok outside or ByteDance outside China is 40 billion, must be trending towards 50 now. That's where the game is being played increasingly. And for CMOs, I get criticized for saying this, but I'll say it again. I think the world has got simpler. I mean, a lot of observers, not you, but observers say that the media marketplace is fragmenting. It's a little bit behind your influencer question. It's not fragmenting, it's getting more consolidated. And the 6 big countries are the 6 that I mentioned, the 3 Western and the 3 Eastern. Throw in Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, Musk. I mean, they're all spending about 550 billion this year on AI capacity, data, energy expansion. So they're going to get stronger. They're not going to get weaker. They're going to get stronger.
Right.
So influencers are a part of that digital economy, a growing part. Whether they're using YouTube or TikTok or whatever, Instagram or whatever, Reels. they're a part of that ecosystem that I'm talking about.
Right. My last question is on AI. If you look at the progression of video editing tools, image editing tools, it's really gotten better and better in the last 6 months.
It's getting better in
Google has Nano Banana Pro and
Yes.
VO, and people are able to generate some of these creatives in-house.
Unbelievable,
On their phone. Again, what does that do to advertising? Do you still need to engage in agency? Will more of it move in-house?
It means the balance of power is shifting, and I do think, there's a lot of discussion about this. There are 3 things clients have got to do. They've got to be much more agile for all the reasons we've been discussing in this interview around the political stuff as well as the technological stuff. They have to take back control of a lot of the things they're doing. And the third thing is they have to have first-party data. When you put those 3 things together, what I think it says is clients are going to have to start thinking about whether they do more in-house. We have 3 models. We have the classic outsourced to us, the embedded model where we put people into clients, but we still pay for them. And then the third is the in-house model. I wouldn't say there's a clear trend towards in-housing, but for example on media planning, I think it is quite clear. One of our clients said to me, the CMO said, we know more about the automotive business than anybody else, and we should have media planning in-house, and he in-housed it. And I think that in a world where you have to be more agile, where you have to take control of your destiny more, and where you have to control and develop and integrate first-party data, in-housing does make a little bit more sense. So I think whether it's embedded or in-housing, so bringing together what you have into a more effective form is, I think, really, really important. And I think that's what we're starting to see. Agencies can play a part in that. We are very involved in in-housing a number of clients, not just in media planning and buying, but in creative too, in building creative studios. The other thing that's really interesting is, if you look at Google and Meta, they both have the beginnings of an end-to-end model. Advantage Plus inside Meta, and PMax or Performance Max inside Google are media planning and buying models, online models for small and medium-sized enterprises. There is no reason why that can't be expanded to the companies. And you take Nano Banana or VO3 and you put it together, you have an end-to-end. I create, I produce, I distribute, I plan and buy an integrated end-to-end campaign. And I think that's becoming more important now. Even Google, which is, as I say, let's say it's around 300 billion out of the 1.2 trillion, so a quarter of the total market or a third of digital. There's 75% or 2/3 that ain't inside Google, at least not yet. And so you're not going to rely on Google alone. So you'll want a validator, an intermediate person to advise on what is the right distribution. So I think agencies still have a vitally important role. It's just going to be different, and it has to be much more technologically based. So knowing the technology, not talking about it, but knowing how to do it is really important.
Right. On that note, thank you very much for talking to us. Thank you.